Let me tell you that 90% of families, wealthy families, fail. The definition of fail is that the wealth is gone and the family is dispersed or dissipated by the third generation. It's so ubiquitous that it's been occurring for hundreds of years, and there are sayings in every civilized culture that describe it. On the graph up there, I put one of the things that are common here, rags to rags in 3 generations. The graph looks like that. Purpose Investor Network is in place to help change the slope of that curve. I'm going to go quickly to what the slope of that curve could look like, and it's this. Ladies and gentlemen, what would it mean to you personally? Can you hear me? I'm sorry. What would it mean to you personally to be able to know that the wealth of your family, and by that I mean the human, the intellectual, you've heard this earlier tonight, the human, the intellectual capital, the financial capital, that the curve that described that would look like the second one we put up there. Keeler Thomas has joined the Purpose Investor Network because for over 20 years we've been involved in projects with colleagues and peers trying to figure out the answers to these questions. It's, in our profession, it was really easy to divide and disperse wealth. But when we watched what was happening to the families that we were serving, that the most important aspects of those families were being lost, it became a grave concern to us, and we launched ourselves heavily into that along with others. If 90% failed, we were convinced that the only way to figure this out was to study the 10% that succeeded. What we found about the 10% that succeeded was something quite interesting. They were very, very efficient in 3 key competencies. I've chosen to represent those competencies as the leg of a milking stool. I'm an old farm boy, and milking cows was a part of my past. Anybody else here had experience with milking some cows? I see some hands. So you remember, did you ever have to use the 2-legged stool? Okay, well you know how that feels, especially when the cow's a little upset. So the 3-legged stool implies stability. The three core competencies that these families were all good at were as follows. 1, they developed very effective intergenerational communication. It was safe, and they knew how to resolve conflict. 2, they were deliberate. Where am I? Sorry. I'm going backwards. Trust me to do that. I'm technically, I can milk cows, but I can't run electronics. The next thing they did was there was a genuine transfer of leadership from the one generation to the next. And what I mean by that is that generational transfer occurred, that leadership transfer occurred before the transferring generation passed on. The most important thing, and this is where we come to the Purpose Investor Network, is that these families created intentionally very meaningful and a lot of plentiful, what we call pre-inheritance experiences. Now, a pre-inheritance experience is an experience that happens, obviously, before they inherit. And we'll talk about that in just a second. But in connection with these 3 core competencies that we talk about up here, we discovered 12 elements that were subsets of these competencies. There are 3 here, there are 4 here, and there are 5 here. And with our colleagues and others, we collaborated together and published a white paper that you have available to you if you'd like to have it this evening. Just let us know what you'd like to get a copy of it. That discusses these 12 elements and the core competencies, and also allows you to sit down with your spouse and do a self-evaluation. Where are you strong? Where are you weak? What things are most important to you? And for those things that are most important and you're weak, there's a gap. And that allows you to use the resources that we think are made available to you to fill that gap and close it and make sure that your family's getting from you what you expect. Well, let's go on and talk about pre-inheritance experiences for just a second. As I mentioned before, a pre-inheritance experience is an experience that happens before they inherit. By the way, when people inherit, what has to have happened? Somebody died, right? So mom and dad aren't there, is the point. The kids have got to figure it out, don't they? If the trust documents and other things are going to distribute the wealth, the kids have got to figure that out. There may be some younger folks that money has to be invested for a period of time. They got to work together on that. They got to figure out how to divide the properties, how to all the retitling and all that kind of stuff. What if the kids have never worked together in financial matters before? And I like to tell the story of mom's doily, that after hundreds of thousands of dollars had been contemplated and divided, and the family blew up over a doily. You ever had one of those experiences? Okay, well, so in a pre-inheritance experience, though mom and dad are present, they're observers only, just like they would have been true if the kids had inherited later. Difference, mom and dad get to observe and make adjustments. The second thing about a pre-inheritance experience is that it is directed and it is planned. It's specifically targeting whatever it is that mom and dad are anxious for the child or the children to learn. And it usually focuses on values. Now, what's so important about experiential learning? Well, there are two types of learning in the world, didactic and experiential. And the one that is most meaningful after we enter young adulthood is experiential. We don't learn very well didactically anymore, hence the need for homework in high school. Or the ability, or needing to practice something over and over again. You've got to connect the mind, the fingers, the body, and the spirit in order for something to be fully internalized. So when we talk about an experiential learning, that's what we're talking about. So for quickly right now, I'd like to walk you through a quick difference between didactic and experiential learning. How many of you have ridden a roller coaster? Okay, don't be bashful. Okay, good. All right, so here we go. You're about to have a roller coaster learning experience didactically. You climb into the car, you sit down in the chair, you put on the safety belt, you pull down the bar. The car leaves the platform. It's going about 2 miles an hour. It ascends a 60-degree angle up 200 feet. It goes down the other side, and there you go. That's didactic roller coaster. Here's experiential. Now, as you look at that picture up there, it's very clear that these people are having different experiences. For example, that person right there says, I'm going to die. This person here is saying, do it some more, and I don't know what you call that. Let me ask you this. Do you think that experience is cemented in that young man's mind forever? How many of you remember your first roller coaster ride? I'd like to take a minute to share an experience with you, if I could now, about experiential learning, about values. This is my favorite story. In years of research and working with families, this is my favorite one. We had a family, 5 children, all older, all with their own families. Dad had died. Mom was wealthy. Mom was concerned that her children, throughout their growing up years, had never had a philanthropic experience. Didn't know what it was like to feel good and for doing good. She wanted them to have that, but she also wanted them to be creative, and she wanted them to learn that doing good didn't take a lot. So in our annual family meetings, we gathered together in our second year. We instituted a thing called the Charitable Challenge. And she challenged each of the families. She said, I'm going to give you some money. I want you to go out, and the rules are this. I want you to go out and find a cause. You can't just give the money away. You've got to engage in it, and you have to follow it all the way to its natural end. Then you come back next year and report at the family gathering. So all the kids were expecting $10,000, $50,000 to do this job with. Guess what Mom offered them? $100. The jaws just fell on the floor. It was remarkable to be there. You should have been there. It's a wonderful experience. So one of the families came up with an incredible answer. Mom and Dad went and looked around. It took them several months. They found an orphanage in Salt Lake City. I can't disclose much more except to tell you that it was there. And for some reason, the kids in this orphanage didn't have any shoes. So they looked at that, they took their kids up there, and then they had an epiphany. 2 of their children had birth dates that were very close to one another. One was the 10th and one was the 12th. They always had a birthday party for the 2, even though they were different in age, right in the middle so that they could do one party for both. Makes sense, right? So they pulled them aside, 8 and 10 years old, and they said, look, we'd like to use Grandma's money to fund your party. It's going to be great. Party favors, treats, cake, ice cream, the whole shebang. We'll ask people to bring presents, but not for you. We'll ask them each to bring a pair of shoes. And here's the list of sizes. Would you be willing to give up your presents so that these kids up in Salt Lake could have some shoes? Well, they're pretty young, these kids, aren't they? But they said yes. So they did it. And the hours after the party, they took all the boxes of shoes. They took the whole family, and especially these 2 kids. They went to that orphanage, and the kids put the shoes on the feet of those orphans. Now, if you think about that face right there, filled with fear, imagine the face, the the faces of those kids is they got a chance physically to connect with what it meant to do good. That is what the Purpose Investor Network offers, ladies and gentlemen. It is an extraordinary source, rich source of pre-inheritance experiences. Places where you can bring your children, they can learn about, you can work on causes that you choose or that they choose. They can engage right there. They can help build the plans. They can go out on site. They can engage in the activity, and they can learn what it feels like to do good. And oh, by the way, you get to do well by doing good. So this third impact that I'm talking to you about provides all of these experiences. And it does that through a process that Kurt's going to explain. Is that right, Kurt?
Yes.
You're going to be talking about the whole process later this evening. I'm just dealing with the third impact. But what happens while they're at Penn, they're going to be surrounded by people who've been successful. They know how to make things happen. They're going to learn about causes and problems. They're going to be able to sit and brainstorm about solutions. There are going to be mentors there to help teach and train them. In addition, I just talked about the networking opportunities. What would it have meant to you as a child to be able to network with some of the more successful names that were around as adults when you were a child? What could you have learned? Not only that, but the Purpose Investor Network, part of its work is going to be creating deal flow and making sure that that deal flow is real, that it's usable. And finally, you as the parent, both for yourself and for the family, are going to be able to match the values that you're trying to teach with the causes you're going to support. It's truly a remarkable opportunity, one for which Keeler Thomas felt like it was very important, at least for those clients that we serve, to have a chance to participate in. So I'd just like to extend an invitation to you now to seriously consider what it would mean to you to have that line we talked about earlier, instead of being a curve that returned to zero, go straight up. What would it mean to you to see the looks on the faces of your children or of those who are closest to you engaged in something that they believed in, kind of like putting the shoes on the feet of the children? What would it teach them, and how would you feel? So tonight, that's where I would like to end, ladies and gentlemen. You have a small sheet in front of you that kind of gives you a chance to tell us a little bit more about what you're interested in. If any of you here would like to have a copy of that 12 Elements piece, you're welcome to it. We just need to know how to get it to you. You need to, if you hand something to one of our staff going out the back door, that would be perfect. Also, if you have interest in other types of family governance information, we have lots of information. Tell us what you're interested in, and we'll try to provide you with some of the resource material that we've either come across or we've created through our own research. We'd be happy to have you have it. Also, we have the 12 elements just listed on a sheet of paper for you as you go, just so you can get acquainted with them. Do you have any questions? Wow, I did a good job. Thanks for coming.